Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Purple Way podcast. My name is Paris, and today I have the pleasure to talk to Dr. Petia Eckler. Petia, how are you?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, my pleasure. Thank you so much. So, Petia, I would love to start with your background and your research on social media and body image.
Yes, absolutely. So, my broader background is in health communication and through mostly social media, but also just traditional legacy media. And so,
Mhm,
what that means is that I study how people interact with the media and the kinds of content they post on the media, the kinds of content they engage with in social media or even in traditional media. And then also I look into the effects of that on people. Uh, or you can also, and I have also focused on purely the content that exists in the media, the way that various issues are presented and framed in the media. So all
mhm.
this falls under the umbrella of just health and communication and the role of all of us as users in that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Interesting. And if I may ask, what made you decide to get into that field?
Into the broader field of health
Yeah.
communication, I've always been fascinated by health, but not to the extent of becoming a medical doctor myself, but because I've
Yeah.
also really loved communication. So I really always enjoyed talking about health and talking to others about health.
Yeah.
But more specifically into the area of body image and social media, I entered that back in 2013, and
Mhm,
it was very much just a life event. I teach this class, I still teach it. It's called Media and Health. And
mhm,
so I teach that to a mix of undergraduate and graduate students. And
mhm.
in that class, students propose their own project and then,
Ah,
try to research it. And so at that point, so back in 2012,
mhm.
we still had mostly Facebook.
Yeah.
And, you know, we were still, I would say, in the age of innocence of social
Yeah.
media when things were mostly good,
Yeah.
when we were not as aware of all the repercussions, psychological, sociological, that social media has on us, you know, on individuals, us as individuals, but also on society. But I had a student in the class who proposed the topic of looking at how social media affects young women's body image and that
Mm.
relationship between the two, between the social media factor and the body image of young women. And I didn't think much of it at first, but the more I thought about the topic and the more I shared actually this idea with others, I started noticing that people are very much interested in this topic, both
Yeah.
adults and young people themselves. And so I figured, well, that's there's so much. It's almost public interest to the topic drew me into it
Sure.
because there's always it's always great pleasure to work on in a field that has a lot of practical impact, that has a lot of public interest, because I feel that my personal view of my work and of research is that it should be used to help people. And so
100%.
uh, I thought that's a great way to connect my research then by going into this field. It's something that there's lots of
Yeah.
public interest among young people as well, and so I thought that would make things a lot more interesting, and it
Yeah.
has.
Yeah. No, 100%. And it's quite interesting what you said. 2012, I think was also when I entered Facebook. And also there was an innocence. We were using social media, I think, in a way to just message our friends, hang out and chat after school and whatever. Whereas now, as you kind of said, I feel like that innocence of social media has been lost. And I think now we're in a completely new level of how we use social media and the impacts it has on us. Which brings me kind of to the next question for you. If we go back 7 years ago to your TEDx talk, right? Do you think you would be able to predict the current state of social media?
The current state, which is in a word worse.
Yeah, Yeah.
Well, I'm an optimist by nature, so I'm always hopeful that things would get better in time, but doesn't
Yeah.
always work this way, does it? Uh, yes, well, going back, so 7 years ago, I talked of how in that TEDx talk, I talked of how uh, what we all do on social media has repercussions outside of social media. So that's not just a digital bubble that stays in itself, but issues, conflicts, the way that we present ourselves very much bleed into life outside of it. And that
Yeah.
has very much continued.
Mm.
Uh, but I don't think I would have predicted
Predicted.
as
Yeah.
much the extent to which, for example, social media has been politicized and
Yeah.
also has become so antagonistic and has become
Mm.
so ridden with conflict and has also been the ground for so much misinformation.
Yeah.
And so, as you rightly said, gone are the days when social media is just a channel to connect with friends and family and
Mm.
maybe your granny who lives miles away and lost cousins and
Yeah.
classmates. Now it's a lot more, it's much closer to just being a broadcast channel.
Mm.
However, without the regulations of traditional broadcast channels. And so yes, we've entered a new phase of social media's development, which has left us with lots of society
Yeah.
level and also individual level consequences.
Yeah, I think also, like for example, from 7 years ago, social media is such a different. Um, yeah, it's a completely new landscape, right? And as you said, like it's not only a messaging platform, and nowadays it's more about like broadcasting misinformation, hate speech, but then also like I can say even like a comparison tool, right? Like you go on Instagram and you just see other people's lives and you compare yourself, and then that has like an impact on your mental health. And specifically we are going to talk as well about
Yes.
body image, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot have changed since 7 years ago.
Yes, yes. And if I can add something, you mentioned Instagram, and absolutely one of the things that has changed also majorly, it's just the rise of commercialization of the
Mm,
platform. Because as you know, we live in a capitalist profit oriented society. So any new platform that comes around, soon after it's discovered, the questions start of how can we monetize that? How
yeah,
can various sorts of people make lots of money off of it? And
yeah,
so we're talking about brands very much entering uh, Instagram and using it as a new way to advertise products and services. We're talking about then regular people jumping on the bandwagon, becoming, you know, uh, working to become influencers of on various levels, the macro influencers and the mega influencers with the thousands of influencers of followers. But also there's nano influencers nowadays who may just have a few hundred followers, and they're also seen, they also push products, they also push services, they also act as brand ambassadors to to various brands. And so unfortunately, nowadays, Instagram is very much a commercial platform. It's
yeah,
very much like reading through a magazine and looking at all these people and brands trying to push you, you know, products and services, but doing it through a way of life,
yeah,
doing it through representing how they live and how they look, and through that, getting you to buy into things.
yeah.
And
Yeah, no, I really like that analogy of like social media, or like specifically Instagram is like a magazine, right? And like you scroll, you scroll, you scroll, and honestly, like I feel like you don't really see someone's just imperfect life or normal life. You just see the micro influencer, posting with like a product or a service to sell you. It is like like a magazine. Like it's like you go through the pages and it's just advertisement after advertisement trying to sell you something. It's not like,
absolutely, yes,
yeah, like it's not real. It's like a
yes,
magazine. Everything
yes,
is filtered. Like
yeah.
I'm just creating the analogy now and I'm just thinking about it. And it is. it does
And
make
those
sense.
images are all also highly curated. You know, that
Yeah,
means those images that we see on Instagram, they're a result of maybe hours
yeah,
of taking an image, of playing with it, of using filters to improve it. The majority of young people now use digital filters before they post a photo. And
yeah,
so Instagram, at least for people that we don't know, okay, we all have friends on Instagram, right? That we follow them because we know them uh in offline ways as well. I don't like to say real life because I'm of
yeah,
the view that social media is also real life. And if you say real life to the offline interactions, then there's the implication that the digital life is not real, but it absolutely
mhm,
is. But
yeah,
for people that you know in offline settings, you have a way to compare how they represent offline and how they represent digitally on
mm,
Instagram. But for people you don't know, you have no point of comparison. And
yeah,
so we are we almost assume that this is how they look in their regular life, and they
yeah,
don't. But
yeah,
this assumption actually of when you see people that when we all see people that look closer to us than to models, right?
yeah,
Excluding the mega influencers like celebrities and Kardashians and whatnot. So when we see the mid-level and low-level uh, people with followers who more or less create this idea that they're one of us, we
mm,
have this assumption of realism, and that assumption makes the communication that they send to us a lot more impactful. Okay,
I see.
because we don't think, well, okay, that's a model, of course they're airbrushed, of course they have personal trainers, of course they have a dietitian working with them. We
Yeah,
don't add those uh you know cautionary footnotes in our heads because we
yeah,
see that, well, they're just like me, they have a job, it's a
yeah,
mom with kids, and so on and so forth. However, this assumption of similarity between us and them is actually quite a tricky thing because it tricks us into thinking that the content they serve is a lot more authentic than it
yeah.
actually is.
Yeah. Wow. That makes total sense, to be honest. Because, like, for example, as you said, like, for a celebrity influencer, of course, that, they have like a team behind them. But, like, for the mid level, low level influencer, when you think that he's just another person like you, like, like, hey, we are like very, very similar. But in reality, that may not be the case. And they may have like a team behind them as well. Or, like, as you said, like all the editing tools and etc
Even
to
if they don't have a team, even if they are a regular person, I
yeah,
guarantee that the content they post online is still a few levels detached from reality, even if it's
yeah,
just through the use of filters. And filters nowadays can change your physique, can shave off 5 kilos off your body shape, you know, can change your skin tone, can take out your blemishes, whatever you're going after. And so that in itself is damaging enough because it
mm,
represents again this unrealistic idea of
yeah,
uh, of how people look
yeah,
you know in offline settings.
yeah, yeah. No, that's interesting. I guess like you have touched on it as well, but like, do you reckon are we in a better or a worse place when it comes to mental health? Um, you know, with
Yeah.
body image and social media, are we in a better place or a worse place?
I think if you look at the research, you would
Mhm.
see just more studies coming up now compared to 10 years ago. And so I think, in a sense, we're in a worse situation in the sense that uh, the effects of social media are now compounding and piling
Mm,
up after years of use.
yeah,
Social media use in itself is more intense and more time
yeah,
consuming. And
yeah,
so all of that has stronger effects on users than, 12, 13 years ago, when by the time you exhaust your former classmates on Facebook and you kind of have to close it because you're kind of done, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
For
yeah,
the time being. Now
yeah,
there's no such thing as being done.
yeah,
You can get sucked into it and waste hours there. And so the effects of that are
hmm,
consequently much stronger because the stimulus of social media is much stronger. But also there's more of there's just more data, there's more of a realization among professionals of those repercussions. So there's a lot more data trying to capture that nowadays than there was, say, a few years back. And
Yeah.
so that is a sign of, yes, there's a lot of problems with lots of, psychological problems with lots of demographic groups in society, but also there's more awareness of it. Okay.
Mm,
The
I
data
see.
is coming out because the research is being done.
Yeah.
While a few years back, you could argue, well, it was the same level of problems, but just we did not know necessarily because we did not ask those questions. We were not looking into that with as much scrutiny as we are nowadays. So,
Yeah.
in lots of societal issues, just because we know more of something does not mean that there's more occurrences of that problem. It
Mhm.
just means there's more reporting of it, you know.
Yeah.
But I think there's actually a little bit of both in this situation. So there's more of these issues widespread through society. And on top of that, which is a good thing, there's more awareness of it
Yeah.
among researchers, professionals, but also hopefully among the regular public.
Which is good. I think, like, for example, like, it definitely starts with self-awareness, right? If you don't know you have a problem, then you're ignorant.
Yeah.
But now we know, as you said, like, through research studies, more people talking about it. There's a awareness being created per se. And, maybe now it's like in the professor research kind of level, and maybe people who kind of like are conscious about their own use of social media. And hopefully, over the years, more and more people will think, oh, like, social media is not good for me. Let me, you know delete all the apps for 1 month, because I think, like, there are trends that,
Yes, a
people go like,
digital detox. Yes.
exactly, digital detox, and
Yeah.
people delete their social media apps for a month and see
Yes.
how it, you
Yeah.
know the effects it has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
At least my generation, I'm 29.
Yes.
I think we have seen the impact of social media, but I'm not sure about the younger generation, the generation that has grown up having social media. Like, I remember a time that I didn't have social media and I was a kid playing, on the streets. But now a lot of kids and the younger generation, when they're 20 years old,
Yeah.
people like 18 to maybe 25, I think they grew up with social media. And, maybe that's a different story that we will touch on
Yes.
shortly.
Absolutely. Yes. So you're on the cusp of, you're probably the last lucky generation at 29
Yeah.
who managed to have a sliver of a childhood without a smartphone.
Yeah.
Uh, and nowadays, a lot of kids don't. The rates of smartphone ownership among very young kids is
Mhm.
just astounding.
It's the peer pressure. Like, of course, like, if everyone in their, school, their friends and etc. have smartphones,
Yeah.
then of course you have that peer pressure of like, oh, why do you not have a,
Yeah.
smartphone and etc. I think it's also then like, how do you explain to your kid having a smartphone and social media is not good for you? And, like, it's finding the ways to say that in a nice way or in a
Yeah.
understandable way to
Yes.
your kids and, like, the younger generation.
Well, as some scholars of social media have said, and
Yeah.
I'm absolutely convinced in that, social media does not necessarily create new problems,
Mm,
but it manages to show again and to rehash and to maybe accelerate problems that have already existed in society. So
I see.
you talk of peer pressure. Peer pressure has always been a thing from before social media. So back in the day, 20, 30 years ago, teenagers were peer pressured into smoking, right?
Mm,
Uh, Today they're pressured into owning a smartphone. And so that's a life lesson. How do you deal with peer pressure?
yeah.
So I have a huge problem with this sentence of, well, everyone has a phone, so let's just get one for myself. Well, you have your own self to think about in your own head to decide how to deal with peer. I mean, yes, peer pressure grows with age,
Yeah.
and uh, teenagers want to be like the rest of the crowd, but
Yeah.
there's life lessons in that as well in the
Yeah.
decisions we make. And I think it's a question of just values. And
Mm.
and I notice
Interesting.
actually the problem I see, because I am a parent now, so I can talk as well. But see, when I parent, I also think of, okay, what's the scientifically, psychologically, what does that mean? So I
Yeah.
like to look at people around me and then, you know, uh, unpack that further. But what I notice is that parents succumb to peer pressure just as much as their kids,
Mm.
because the
Interesting.
peer pressure of the fellow parents giving their kids phones affects parents as well, you know. But
Yeah.
we should we should be stronger than that, you know. If
Yeah.
you want to teach a life lesson, you have to live it as well. And so, and I know it sounds very preachy and very,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe unrealistic, but why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah.
Everything is realistic when you start doing it.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that it's unrealistic at all to wait until high school or even further. Now, individual students would struggle, but that's where we need to start having a conversation on a broader level, you know. And I think some of that is starting to happen already, even in schools, in high schools in this country, in the UK. And so, if nothing else, that at least starts chipping away at this omnipresence of smartphones, of social media, and this assumption that that's the way to live life.
Yeah.
Uh, so, but I think a few more years will pass till we get to a happy medium.
Yeah. 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 No, that's interesting. We will get back to this, but like another somewhere else I wanted to focus, and you said it in the beginning, kind of like how you came up with studying social media and body image. I think originally body image was more focused on women, right? And
Yes.
have we started now seeing a trend where men feel also the pressure of keeping up with their body image? Are there
Yes.
studies on that?
Yeah, very much so. So,
Yeah.
for years, issues of poor body image as a result of media consumption have been predominantly among women, young
Hmm.
women. Nowadays, young men are very much under similar pressures, and a growing percentage of them, fall victim to such to the double standards of having to present with certain physique, even though those standards are often unrealistic.
Yeah.
So young women for decades have fought this battle of between nature and societal expectations, and now that's getting very much into young men as well. And so we see a growing number of them, uh, presenting with poor body image, but also
Mm.
a growing number presenting with eating disorders or
Oh, wow.
with just you know abnormal behaviors such as abuse of steroids or abuse of uh, you know supplements that aim to change body shape.
Yeah.
So yes, that's a trend of the past few years, and
Yeah.
in a sense, girls have always grown up with this expectation. Some
Yeah.
boys, that may be something, and it's not that I'm normalizing it. I don't mean to
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
that it's okay that girls grow up in a society where they face these expectations from a young age. It's not okay by no means. But
Yeah.
now young boys, then you know young adult men are very much in huge numbers now joining that trend.
Yeah. No, that's quite interesting because, like, for example, I see the influence of, again, on Instagram, and I see myself like comparing myself with like just like different reels that I see, and like people, men exercising and etc. And I don't have that physique, and I'm like, like, why do I not have that physique? And then I go and try to chase that physique. If you don't have like values, as you said before, or if you don't have critical thinking, then you will just chase what you see. And I was reading yesterday how, for example, like a lot of the things that we do is because we want to be at the same level with other people and have the same things, but like we want them because other people have them, not
Yes,
because we personally
yes,
want them.
yes.
We don't have critical thinking to think for ourselves and what do I want and why do I want that. Yeah.
And it's difficult. And I mean, yes, we're all social animals. We look to each other to see what others have, what we don't have. that's part of life, and that's why I say it's the same thing as with having a smartphone at 11.
Yeah.
Afterwards that would grow into having lip fillers at 15, and having what, plastic surgery at 20, and then where does that stop? And so, well, it stops at the point when you realize that you have your own life in your own body to deal with, and those other people have their own. So it can become a very vicious cycle of chasing things, maybe attaining them, and then realizing they were not worth chasing in the first place, or they don't make you happy.
Yeah.
I mean, but there's also, in terms of just fitness and exercising and everything, there's a fine. So, you know, on the other hand, there's a fine line between exercising for appearance reasons and exercising for health.
Yeah.
So exercise for health is obviously something that is encouraged and is very much part of public health recommendations.
Hmm.
And we live an increasingly sedentary lifestyle, all of us. We
Yeah.
all move less and less and sit around more. And so, you know, exercise and lifestyle movement is active lifestyle is a good thing. The
Yeah.
problem becomes when that is only driven by appearance, when that's only motivated as a way to make you look a certain way rather than as a way to make you feel better, or as a way to just have a more, uh, fulfilling, rounded life, or as a
Yeah.
way to enjoy yourself. I mean, exercising is enjoyable, playing games, going hiking, and all that.
Yeah.
Uh, but the moment that becomes only a way to reach a certain body type, it's where it becomes a problem. But it's also where people often lose motivation,
Mm.
because there's research that shows that exercise that's motivated by appearance reasons is a lot more unstable in terms of the motivation factor than
Mm.
exercise that's just for other reasons. So
Huh. Yeah. No, that's interesting. I never thought about it, but it does make sense because what I have kind of realized in the last like maybe 1 year is, or what I'm pondering upon is the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, right? And if you're doing it for an external factor, appearance is an external thing. Like, you
yes.
want to look good for for your peers, or like, for the social media, whatever. That's like a low motivation, external low motivation. But if you do it for your health, and that's what I have, like for example, I exercise because I want to be able to live a long, healthy life, right? And I think that's intrinsic. And
Hmm.
yeah, I find that a better reason to exercise than
Yeah.
to look better and look, good on social media.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But you can also exercise because it's fun. And I mean,
Yeah,
exercise
sure. Yeah.
sounds doesn't sound fun, but uh
Yeah.
you can, there's lots of ways to be active. You can go play football with your buddies, and
Yeah.
there's a social element to that. You can run together in the park with girlfriends. You can play volleyball. You can do lots of things that are active. You can even walk, like,
Yeah.
instead of meeting a friend at a cafe and sitting
Yeah.
around for an hour, you can take a walk for that
Yeah.
hour, you know, and
Yeah.
move and also talk. And so that's the way to build physical activity into your life, and not see it only as a means to becoming slimmer or whatever. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely agree with you. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And another question I wanted to ask you is like, what does the research show when it comes to how much time we spend on social media? Is there like a correlation between the more time we spend on social media, the worse it becomes? And is there like a golden ratio or like a balance of like if we spend like maybe 1 hour or 2 hours, that's fine. But if you
yeah.
exceed like 3 or 4 hours, then that becomes negative for your mental health.
Hmm. Yes, absolutely. So, yes, I have myself researched time
Hmm.
as a variable of social media use, because I think that's just as important as the content itself that we
Yeah,
consume, simply because the content we consume is a factor of time, right? Because
yeah,
the more time you spend, the more you will read, the more
yeah,
videos you watch, the more views you
yeah,
watch, and the more things you do. And so uh, I've always been interested in this issue of time. And what's the influence between that and the effects of social media. uh, so I just read recently actually a meta-analysis study,
Mhm.
which means a study that reviews other studies
Mhm.
and in a very scientific way. Uh, and that study looked at the connection between risk of depression and time spent on social media.
Uh-huh.
And it reviewed uh, 2 dozen other studies published
Wow.
through the years,
Yeah.
specifically on adolescents, so on teenagers. And what it found was that yes, there was a significant association between time spent on social media and risk for depression among teenagers.
Yeah.
And so the more time that was spent there, the higher the risk of depression among
Yeah.
teenagers. And what's interesting also is that there's a gender difference. This risk
Mm.
was much more pronounced for girls than for boys. Um, and they also so they measured time per day, and they also said, so they did their calculations and they said that an additional hour a day of social media increases the risk by 13%.
An extra hour a day can increase the risk of depression 13%
Yes, yeah, for each hour
for
that
each
you
hour.
act. Hmm.
But what did the meta study show? Like, okay, like, can you spend 1 hour on social media without like the risk of depression, or what did they like? Did they have like?
Yes, yeah,
Did they have the conclusion to say like, okay, you can spend 1.5 hour, and that's the maximum you should.
yeah,
If you
yeah.
spend 2.5, then your risk of depression also increases. So,
I looked at that little graph for that same question, and to be honest, uh, it started climbing up very quickly. So the risk started increase. The graph was very
okay,
steep, which means the
yeah,
risks grow quite strongly.
damn,
Probably
okay,
around the 1 hour mark, things seemed safest.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and when you
yeah,
think an hour a day is not impossible, maybe, I mean,
yeah,
yes, it's
yeah.
obviously 2 hours is worse, 3 hours is worse, four is worse.
Yeah, no, it's quite interesting. Like, I find myself now being more aware of when I'm on my phone, right? And of course, like with again, like I don't even have TikTok or Snapchat. Like, I only
Yeah,
have Instagram. That's kind of like the main one that I use, and then like
yes,
maybe Threads or Twitter. But like sometimes I'm aware of what time I start scrolling on Instagram, and then I'm aware of what time I finish, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, 45 minutes just
yeah,
scrolling through reels.
of doing
And
nothing.
it's crazy, the algorithm,
Yeah,
it's so good that
yeah,
it knows exactly what you want
yeah,
to watch, like a plethora of like reels,
hmm, hmm,
and I'm like, what, like,
yeah,
it just sucks you in.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you are a young adult with a grown, fully matured brain at
Mm.
29.
Yeah.
Okay, because the brain matures. So this is something that not everyone knows, that the brain develops obviously through childhood, but all
Mm.
through adolescence, and it doesn't reach maturity until people's mid 20s or late
Oh
20s.
wow.
An immature brain has far worse impulse control, far worse decision making, far worse planning, prioritizing, those sorts of things. And so
Yeah.
all of these are key skills for dealing with social media,
Yeah.
which you can see now how
Yeah.
younger users simply do
Yeah.
not have. They don't have them because of their biological age. So
Yeah.
social media cannot make brains mature faster, maybe
Yeah.
probably on the contrary. And so, yes, these young brains that are undeveloped and that have very little impulse control are thrown into, you know, an environment with such loud stimuli that, of course, it will be impossible for them to get to suck themselves out of it.
Yeah.
And it is not young people's fault, and it is not the kids' fault,
No.
because those platforms are designed in a way to make us stick to them and to
Yeah.
keep eyes on screen, and that's the goal. It's difficult even for people, yes, as
Yeah.
yourself, who is fully
Yeah.
aware, who has that mature brain,
Yeah.
who very much is interested in the topic. So you are uh a consumer of information who is very critically aware and self-aware, and you
Yeah.
still find it that 45 minutes you can get sucked into a reels.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and how about the 13-year-old, that does
I
not
know.
have that level of personal awareness, social awareness, does not have even the hardware in their
Yeah.
brains, the biological hardware to resist
Yeah.
any of this. So
Yeah.
this is where external controls should come in, just
I see.
to
Yeah.
help children and teenagers
Yeah.
with this.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And would you say like that's kind of like the biggest age group, the teenagers, like 13, maybe to 18,
Mhm.
that are the most vulnerable group when it comes to social media?
Yes, but I would also add to that children, because unfortunately,
Okay.
lots of children way younger than 13 have
Yeah.
smartphones and
Mm.
use them for social media. Uh,
Yeah.
so I was actually listening uh, to a podcast recently that talked about this, and they said something like that in the UK at age 11, 90% of kids had a smartphone by that age.
90,
Mhm.
90%. Jesus Christ. That's mad. That
And that is not for safety reasons to call home if you're stuck somewhere, because
yeah.
dumb phones, as they're now called, the regular phones that still make phone calls, because phones
Yeah.
used to be for phone calls,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that covers that reason to have a phone.
Yeah.
Everything else
Is an extra.
is an
Yeah.
extra that
Yeah.
frankly at that point is unnecessary at that age.
100%.
And so when we talk about groups at risk, yes, 13 to 18-year-olds to 19-year-olds are at risk, but what about
Yeah.
the 11-year-olds?
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic, and I really want to bring more people to the podcast because, like, for example, like, as you said, like, external control has to come into place, and that could be, the government, the parents, the, you know, the social media companies, yes, but then at the same time, they don't care, you know, because I really love the analogy that you said of a magazine, and a magazine has a lot of advertisements, and they make their money from the
Yeah,
advertisements, right?
the
So
same with social media platforms.
exactly, exactly. Like,
Yes,
a
absolutely.
social media platform will never want to control people, like who can enter their
Yeah,
platform and whatever, because they will lose revenue, they will lose profit, and they don't want that. So,
absolutely.
yeah, that's where, like, I think parents and maybe the government somehow,
There's a huge the profit motive for social media companies is too serious to allow them the luxury to self-regulate. Uh,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's no, yes, that
yeah,
is not the way to go forward, I don't think.
yeah,
And for example, Facebook's most recent move to take out the the announcement that they're taking out any fact checkers that they had
yeah,
previously introduced, that's yet another example
mm,
of the lack of response of social responsibility.
yeah,
And so yes, I think social media companies will continue doing the bare minimum,
yeah,
just to stay in the game and
yeah,
to avoid stronger regulation from governments, because see, they've done something. So we should not look to them to self-regulate. External regulation should be applied
yeah,
to that. It's as
yeah,
simple as that, because they are acting as broadcast companies at the moment.
yeah,
It's not just the town square where people gather and exchange ideas. It stopped being that a
yeah.
long time ago.
No, it's interesting. Yeah. um Something else, like, if we move kind of a little bit towards psychology, right? What would you say are the underlying causes of maybe depression, anxiety, and like body dissatisfaction?
Well, it's very complex. Research shows that there's hereditary factors, there's
Yeah,
biological factors, there's factors that have to do with just growing up and cognitive development.
yeah,
There's also huge sociocultural factors as well. So my research is in the sociocultural area
yeah,
of all this, and sociocultural deals with how people communicate with each other and how they use the media to communicate with each other. But that's not the whole range of factors that influence mental health. So definitely there's neurological and biological factors as well, hereditary factors as
Yeah.
well, uh, that influence mental health. So I don't want to draw 100% to put 100% of the reasoning in social media and
Yeah.
sociocultural factors. However, those are also factors that influence, in terms of body image, how people perceive themselves,
Hmm.
how did they perceive they fit into society,
Yeah.
and then if those perceptions are negative, that has a knock-on effect on other mental health issues,
Yeah.
such as anxiety, low self-esteem, depression, and so forth, and risk for disordered eating, for eating disorders. So
Yeah.
eating disorders themselves are mental illnesses,
Mm.
and so things are quite interrelated between experiences of poor body image and then follow on uh, mental health challenges. But again, the reasons and the factors behind it are quite complex, and they don't
Yeah.
all fall into the sociocultural basket. But those are
Yeah.
significant. The sociocultural factors are definitely
Yeah.
significant because they may increase or decrease risks for certain, for anyone on an individual level, because
Mm.
they create situations and triggers, and then we all respond to them in certain ways. But also the sociocultural factors are those that create awareness about
Mm.
these issues. Those are the factors that create stigmatization of those
Mhm.
issues, so that's also sociocultural already.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's quite interesting. When I was kind of asking the question, I realized that, like, of course, like, you can't just blame and pinpoint social media for like an increase in, like, depression, anxiety, and etc. Like, there are other societal issues that are going on. But like, yeah, definitely, I kind of like social media plays a role, but maybe the what I'm wondering now is like at what level, at what level does social media play a role towards the increase in depression, loneliness, anxiety, and body dissatisfaction?
It's difficult to give a percentage of that, to say
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly, okay, social media is 30% and this is
Mhm.
40 and this is
Yeah,
something
yeah.
else, because it's different from individual to individual. And people who maybe manage social media better, people
Mm,
who maybe they may have a better experience with social media, and so their other factors may be more consequential. We tend to put a lot of uh, our eggs into the social media basket, because a lot of interactions nowadays, a lot of social interactions that maybe back in the day, a few decades ago, would have happened in face-to-face settings, now
yeah,
happen on social media. And
yeah,
so, but the issue there is that it's the interactions themselves
yeah,
that are the problem, not that. And if they had occurred in face to face, then it would have been recognized that they are the problem. But if they now are moved also on social media, then that just gets all lumped together with everything else you do on social media, you see?
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so I'm afraid that nowadays, when we just say, well, social media is to blame, we kind of sweep a lot of problems under the same carpet,
Yeah,
and that's not helpful. A decade ago, that meant a certain thing, that
yeah,
social media is responsible.
yeah,
Nowadays, when we start placing responsibility on social media, we have to actually first unpack what we mean.
yeah,
Is that the interpersonal interactions and the bullying that happens on maybe group chats, okay,
yeah,
like WhatsApp and maybe Snapchat, and some, because that's something that back in the day would have happened in the schoolyard
yeah, yeah,
or in the neighborhood. So
yeah,
that is a different issue to the content that we all consume from people we don't know, like
yeah,
influencers. And that's a different issue from the bullying we may see and inflammatory content we see maybe on X about political topics. Okay. So
yeah,
all these are different issues and different kinds of interactions, but they're all now under the umbrella of social media. But we need to be unpacking those, because that's the only way to deal with, because you would have different approaches and different solutions to these issues.
yeah. No, it's very beautiful, and like you explain it quite well, to be honest. Because like as you said, like we sweep a lot of issues under the umbrella of social media, but that's not the case. We need to really take one by one the problems and understand them in a deeper level and understand what's really actually happening, and not just say, as a scapegoat, we use social media to blame, right? It's very interesting. And I think that happens also with finance, right? Like a lot of people say, oh, like, we should blame education that they don't teach us personal finance.
Hmm.
But I think like it's just using scapegoating education as a way to not learn personal finance, because like you have your family, you have yourself, like, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's very interesting how we can just blame social media for societal issues, but like maybe that's not the case, and we just need to go even further down,
And I'm not saying to give social media companies a pass and not hold them responsible, but
yeah.
uh, we should actually be quite more specific in what we mean by
Mm,
social media, because it's the same as with my students when I say, okay, so I teach classes in journalism, right? And so I say,
yeah,
okay, where do you get your news? And they say social media. And I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't tell me much because
yeah,
there's so
yeah,
many. So do you get your news from the official news feed of the BBC?
yeah,
Do you go straight to the source of the BBC, and even though it's on social media, you get it there? Or do
yeah,
you get your news from TikTok videos, which is
yeah,
completely different? Or do you get your news from Elon Musk's X feed? So they're all on social media, right?
yeah,
But there's
yeah.
a very huge difference from one to the other to the other. And so, yes, I think uh, we need to be quite more discerning when we talk about social media.
Would you say there is a positive side on social media and the impact that social media has when it comes to our body image? Is there any research on that?
Yes, absolutely. So I hate scaremongering and
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and presenting. Uh, if we only talk about the negatives of social media, it would be a very one-sided conversation. And I do want us to have a holistic conversation that also touches on the positives of social media for mental health and for body image in particular.
Yeah.
Uh, so specifically for body image, I think some positive developments in that have been through the rise of content from body positivity and body neutrality
Mm,
advocates, which is people who support a more positive view towards one's body or a neutral view towards one's body, which means, okay, just live with it, just deal with it, take your
yeah.
body as it is and move on.
Yeah.
uh, now, there is a obviously there's always a yes but in any
Yeah.
situation. There is a trick to that as well, because actually body positivity movements have been around now. The body positivity movement has been around um, for years,
Yeah.
and long enough to where there's also research now on how it represents the body and what effects it may have on users. And some academics have actually come as good as the idea of body positivity and body neutrality is.
Mm,
Some academics and their research have pointed out that actually those same people often fall into the same trap of focusing on the body and of actually showing their bodies in ways that still aim to present a positive light on them.
mm. Yeah.
And so if you think about it, how deeply ingrained this idea is of performing to the best light that our bodies can fit into, that even advocates who claim to do the opposite and who aim to empower users to love their bodies, they still end up often with content that's too too objectified and too much focused on specific body parts and too sexualized. And so then the point that you're doing it from a body positive entry point and with a body positive goal is just not enough in that point. As of now, the bottom line of body image research and how to deal with just content representing bodies is to just engage less with it and focus
Mm.
our attention on things that the body can do and not
Yeah.
the ways that it looks, and
Yeah.
just diversify our attention and refocus on other aspects of life, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
so when people coming from a body positivity and body neutrality, angles,
Standpoint. Yeah.
still sexualize their bodies and still
Mhm.
objectify their bodies,
Yeah.
that kind of loses the benefit of that. Advice from researchers, academics, people who work in this field towards parents, for example, on how to talk to their kids about this. It's not to
Mhm.
say, you're beautiful, don't worry about it, your body is great, but because that again creates this idea that you have to keep your body a certain way and you have to
Yeah.
work to keep beautiful, and to
Yeah.
keep perfect and to keep whatever you are already doing.
Yeah.
But the idea is to actually be thinking and talking of, well, look, your body is here to serve you through this life, to allow you to go places, to do things,
Yeah.
okay, to allow you to enjoy life. And so let's just, instead of reminiscing about our bodies, let's just go and take on a hobby or just do
Yeah.
something else, so really
Yeah.
diverting attention from this topic altogether.
Yeah. Speaking for myself, right? Like I sometimes I cut myself being in my mind a lot, right? And thinking of my body and how like I want to improve it and how I want to, like change it and whatever. But like being in your mind does not really help. And like actually going out, going for the walk, or even like, completely thinking of something else. Or just taking action rather than like
Yeah.
thinking of the problem, try and find a solution, right?
And it's tricky, it's a tricky bit, because you want to keep, a healthy body, and a body that's active and everything. uh and appearance is very much in our society intertwined with that. And so, and young kids, boys and girls, grow up in this from a very young age. There's research that shows this: from 5 years old, girls already know that they should look a certain way, which is just
That's
mind blowing.
crazy.
It is
5
mind
years
blowing.
old.
Uh,
That's mad.
absolutely. And so that is permeated in society in so many ways that
Yeah.
we're not even aware half the time of how
Yeah.
that happens. We like to blame social media for things and
Yeah.
everything that happens in
Yeah.
our life, but it's actually us, ourselves, and the way we talk to each other that should very much take a more focused look, because
Yeah.
a lot of the influences on body image come not just from the media, but from friends and family. From friends and family, and the way they talk to young women and young girls,
Yeah.
shaming
Yeah.
them about how their bodies look from a very young age. And in some cultures that are more collectivistic in nature, in
Mhm.
cultures where there's an expectation that parents and aunties and cousins will butt into your business and are allowed to comment on everything about you,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is actually most cultures around the world.
Yeah.
uh, those comments are free flowing, and they do
Yeah.
nothing but shame young women. And
Yeah.
your auntie that comments on, oh, you've packed a stone, what have
Yeah.
you been eating, you know obvious shaming of gain, of weight gain.
Yeah.
If you go back to that auntie and say, now wait a minute, why would you say that, and to challenge
Yeah.
her, she may come back and say, well, I just want you to be, you know healthy and better
Yeah.
looking and whatever, and
Yeah.
I want you to change in a way that just, I she may say that she means well by
Yeah.
wanting to motivate that young woman into behavior change, into better eating habits or more exercise or whatever. And
Yeah.
okay, but psychological science has not yet shown an effect on behavior change from negative emotions and negative motivation. Okay? You do
Interesting.
not start changing your behavior and start exercising from places of shame, from
Yeah.
places of guilt, from places of self hatred. Okay? These are not the ways to motivate people into changing behaviors. That is not sustainable and it's not effective. And
Yeah.
so, what are you achieving then at the end of the day?
Yeah, like I think that's a very interesting, and I think like our culture, like I'm from Greece, right?
Hmm.
And I think we have that, and I like a lot
You
of
have
aunts.
those aunties, yes,
Exactly. Yeah, of course.
that
You do
would
have those
comment.
people who just
Yes,
shame you. And they,
yeah.
from one hand, right, like they don't know better. Like that's
Hmm.
kind of like right now, that's what I will say. But then also, like, for example, like I have a sister and a brother, but like my sister has two twin
Hmm.
kids, 5 years old. And for me, whenever I go and see them, I want to be able to say those positive things, right,
Mm.
to them as they grow up. And
Yeah,
also, like,
yeah,
my parents raising them, like they come over and etc. It's like, okay, mom, dad, like, be mindful what you tell those
yeah,
kids because you don't know in a 5-year old how their
yeah.
brain works and
Yes,
whatever and how they interpret things.
yes,
So it's very
yes.
important.
You never know how they're going to take some, but not even a 5-year-old, older kids as well, and everything. And so, uh, meaning well is not
Yeah.
an excuse for using rude and offensive language,
Yeah.
because if you mean well, then say it well, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Say
lots of
something positive.
researchers and activists are saying, well, wait a minute, why do you need to comment when you see a young kid? When you haven't seen them in a long time and you see them, why do you need to comment on their appearance? Talk
Yeah.
about their hobbies. Ask them about school. Talk about something else. You don't need to, the first line of conversation doesn't have to be, oh, you've gained weight, or oh, you've lost weight. You look great. Ask them what clubs they go to, what they like doing, you know, stuff like that. There's lots of other topics of conversation
Yeah.
between all of us that don't
Yeah.
have to involve our
Yeah.
bodies. Because this is how also we acculturate young people to continue this same cycle of talking about this.
100%. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
because
yes,
that's
yes.
what they're used to from a very,
Of
very young age.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And as you say, the cycle continues. I do also want to ask you, how can we educate ourselves in media literacy? How can we apply critical thinking, and how can we, again, educate ourselves in media literacy?
Yes, and that's something that through the years, lots of organizations, larger and smaller ones, have tried to do, and it's always been very much a pocketed approach, for some
Yeah.
audiences, some of the time. I think it's just a question of, first of all, realizing all of us taking stock of how
Hmm.
much time we spent on social media.
Yeah.
And again, by that I mean you unpacking again this social media umbrella into smaller bits and
Yeah.
thinking of why do you go to this particular platform, what's your
Hmm.
motivation. So media use is often studied through the point of motivations for use it and what you get out of it as a user.
Yeah.
uh, and so okay, so why do you go on Instagram every day? Why do you spend 2 hours there? Okay, well, I want to do, just thinking
Yeah. Yeah.
critically to yourself of what motivates you to go there, but also what do you get out of it? Okay,
Yeah.
do you get out of it the same thing what you expect? Do you get out of it less and worse things that you maybe plan for or imagine?
Yeah.
I'm not saying throw your smartphone in a bin and never pick it up again, because there's lots of good things that go with a
Sure.
smartphone.
Yeah.
We use it as alarm clocks nowadays for cookbook
True.
recipes and everything.
Yeah.
Listening to podcasts about your hobby
Yeah.
is not the same as spending 2 hours watching mindless reels on
Yeah.
Instagram. And so, let's say our smartphones, you can just find a favorite podcast,
Yeah.
listen to it instead of, as maybe you're walking, as you're cooking, as you're doing something else.
Yeah.
Um, but also, in terms of media literacy, I would say taking stock of
Uh-huh.
the and kind of revisiting the accounts and people that you follow on the different
Mm.
platforms, and
Yeah.
trying to think of, okay, who are these people? Why do you follow them? You know, if it's just friends and family, even then, I mean, even back in the day, so we started with the golden days of Facebook where you just followed friends and family. Uh,
Yeah.
that's not to say that those groups did not have the same negative effect on body image. They did. And that was my research from 2013.
Yeah.
back when we followed very much people we knew. Uh, and so even with people we know, it's always useful to have, I think, you know, maybe every few months to have a self-realization and a self-cleaning, almost a spring cleaning of, okay, who am I following? Who am I interacting with on these platforms? Okay, your friends. We all have friends that make us feel bad about ourselves for
Yeah.
various reasons. You know, the
Yeah.
ones that are oversharing things that, or the ones that are pretending too much to be what they're not, or whatever, whatever. We
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
our own personal triggers, and we all have the people who manage to push those triggers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the question then becomes of, why do you still follow them, on social media? If
Yeah.
you have people that make you feel bad, and that's one good thing about social media, you can always unfollow, unfriend, and it's easier to do that on social media than in real life. you know
True.
that's what I'll
Yeah.
say. So
Yeah.
you can always decide to stop a certain person from making you feel bad online. It's just, and it doesn't have to be even confrontational. They wouldn't know. You would know.
Yeah.
You would feel the difference.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and so, yeah, that can be applied to people you know and to people you don't.
Yeah.
And so,
No, that's good advice. I think, like, again, like, I go back to the fundamentals, which is like, in this point again, it's like kind of bring awareness on how much time do you spend on social media? Why do you spend, what do you look at when you are on social media? And also what, as you said, like what you get out of it. Like, for example, for me, sometimes I'm bored, so I will go on social media because of course it's such a stimulated thing,
yes,
right? But okay, if I'm bored, then
yeah,
okay, can I read a book, or can I, like go for a walk, or like do something else? Or if it is still social media, can I read some articles? Like
yeah,
something like that. Like,
absolutely,
find different alternative
yes,
ways to spend your time on social media that are a little bit more productive rather than
yeah.
as you said, mindless scrolling, right?
And
100%.
sometimes you need a laugh. I mean, I'm not.
Sure.
I don't want to be a killjoy.
Yeah.
Of just saying, don't have a laugh on social media. I mean, because
Yeah.
someone may come and say, okay, come on, you're taking all this too seriously.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
everyone, we all want to have a laugh on social media, and we all know where to find that. And
100%.
that's
Yeah.
fine. I mean, it's absolutely fine. Just don't do it
Yeah.
for 3 hours a day, you know,
Exactly.
and don't allow your kids to do it for 3 hours a day. Yes. And also for others who say, I mean, that's the thing. Figure out your motivations for going on social media and think of,
Yeah.
are there other ways to do this? If,
Yeah.
for example, if talking to your teenage kid and they say, well, all my friends are there, I want to connect with them. Okay, but instead of just sitting around each in your living rooms chatting on WhatsApp, if you're in the same neighborhood, in the same city, just go
Yeah.
out together.
Yeah.
Just do it in offline environments.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's wrong with that? Why do you have to? Why would socializing have? I mean, unless there's a barrier of distance, obviously,
Yeah.
long term socializing, long distance socializing.
Yeah.
Uh, if you can be in the same space together, then do that. If you go on social media to find out about news, well, there's actual news sites for that. Pick your favorite news outlet, media outlet for news, and go there. You don't have to be on TikTok looking at news videos when you can actually do it from the horse's mouth. And so I think these are ways to diversify our online experience. And again,
Mm.
reading news online would still be online, but it would
Yeah.
just be outside of the algorithms of TikTok, for
Yeah.
example, that push certain content. And it will be in the more neutral environment of just a media's website.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if that's the goal.
Yeah.
So just diversifying, not going again to social media for all our needs, for
Yeah.
information, for socialization, for fun, for entertainment. There's different, we should find different channels for all these needs and not just
Yeah.
one channel for everything,
Yeah.
which
No,
sucks
I
to
do.
say.
Yeah. No, I do agree. I do agree. Diversification. I like that word as well. Like, just diversify your time and how you spend
And
it.
that's also financial advice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Diversify your portfolio.
Of
So it's
Yeah.
nothing new,
Makes
but
sense.
we can apply it in
Yeah.
this. in this part of life as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think we have touched upon, because like another question I had is like, what is some advice for parents that you have? But I don't know if you have something else to add. What advice do you have for parents when it comes to, you know, a conversation they would
Yeah.
have with
Yes.
teenage kids, with their teenage kids?
I think there's a conversation to be had about the effects of social media on these kids. Maybe not in a preachy way to where you
Yeah,
sit your kid down and you start lecturing them of how bad it is for them, but
yeah,
maybe have them lead the way and have them give them a task. Okay, go out and find out what is the current state of knowledge about how social media affects people your age,
mm,
and see what
yeah,
they come up with. Okay, let
yeah,
them kind of bring the information and have that realization themselves rather than trying to pour it into their heads. Because if we do the latter, which we often do as parents, what ends up happening is resistance to the information,
mm,
because
yeah,
it's upside down, it's not bottom up from them. Uh,
yeah,
and so, and I think with young kids, with kids, with teenagers, the main thing is overcoming the resistance to
yeah,
change of the status quo.
yeah,
Over also working, obviously the issue of peer pressure would come up. Everyone else is there, what can I do? Well,
yeah,
that's a life lesson. That's a teaching moment.
yeah, yeah,
You have peer pressure to deal with for the rest of your life. It starts with smartphones and social media. It goes into the kind of jobs you take. It goes
yep,
into how much money you make, the
yep,
holidays you go on. It
yep,
goes into wait until you have kids. And if you're a mommy, you start comparing your kids with those of other mommies and what every brilliant child does and how they're
yeah,
better than everyone. And so peer pressure is not going to go away in
yeah,
in our life, but each one of us should learn how to deal with it in more constructive ways than just becoming victims of it.
yeah,
But that's a conversation that, because this excessive use of phones and of social media is a representation of the peer pressure on that particular aspect.
yeah,
But again, the problem of peer pressure is one that exists throughout life. And so using this as a teaching moment, and not again as a teaching as a one way I teach you something, but
yeah, I
as
see.
a learning moment, as a moment of discussion, uh,
Yeah.
with these young people, with these children.
Yeah, yeah, it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
If you, as you said, like if you lecture them, then they won't listen because they will resist. But if it's a two-way communication and like you ask them, okay, go find the information, like, see the impact, then you will hopefully create a better relationship with your kids, and they will be able to also understand the relationship they can have or they should have with social media as well.
But I
And
also want to add something else, that
yeah,
we
sure.
need to lead by example in all this,
Yeah,
because you can't say, for example, oh, you should limit. And we talked about time, and that's another thing. Just keep having real awareness of the actual time spent,
yeah.
okay, on social media, because that's a real important factor. But leading by example means you cannot say, okay, no phones on the dinner table while we have dinner, and then you yourself are on the phone checking email.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
you can't say, I mean, okay, the problem with us adults is that we also have work email there, and we have things that are not just social. A lot of
yeah,
adults use their devices as computers as well.
yeah,
But we need to not look hypocritical to our
yeah.
kids. I've seen this also said in comments in media, also stories about schools that introduce bans on phones in on
Mm,
the school grounds. That okay, the teachers take all the phones of the students and don't let them have it, but then the teachers themselves sit around during the break on their phones.
yeah, yeah,
Well, that's a little two-faced, isn't it? So,
yeah,
if we are introducing a change, as probably all of us should in this
yeah,
regard, we should work real hard to lead by example as well, and not just impose that change on the kids, but then
yeah,
think that we are, yes, we should not be part of it because we're grown-ups, because a lot of these issues also affect all of us. And
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, 100%. I do like that as well. Like lead by example, because definitely, like and also like kids mirror the parents, right? So if
Yeah,
they see the parent being on their phone, they will be on the phone. If they see the parent, like I don't know, reading a book,
yeah,
they will probably read a book as well, right?
yeah.
Um, if I were to ask you to predict the landscape of social media in 7 years from now,
Mm.
where do you think we will be? It's a difficult one.
It's a difficult one.
Yeah.
I think obviously more AI
Mm,
involvement in everything. I'm not
yeah.
sure what that would mean for content related to body image necessarily, but I think in
Yeah.
general there will be more maybe content written by AI or AI as part of strategic decision making on how social media is used. I hope, I don't know if that would happen. I hope more regulation
Mm,
towards social media companies
yeah.
by governments in various countries, and just from this realization that there is real harm happening to young people in particular. But there's also harm to on a broader scale. Talking now more about politics and just the social fabric of our societies. We
Mm,
all know the harm you know, that's happening there as well, in the
yeah.
way that social conversations are led, in what is being said, in how it's being said, and everything. Uh, and so, yes, realizing that somebody has to do something about this, and I hope that those somebodies, raise up to their responsibilities in the future and do it. Uh,
Yeah.
I hope also the next 7 years sees younger kids being allowed to be kids for longer without social media and
Yeah.
without smartphones. So taking back some of that. So I'm hopeful for the next generation that they don't grow up with smartphones from, you know, age of
Yeah.
5, 6, 7, as it's the case often nowadays.
Yeah.
So a little bit of deceleration. These processes have been very much accelerating and going into a frenzy over the past 10 years.
Yeah.
So I hope that we kind of take a step back and rein in
Yeah.
some of this content, some of this speed, some of this, just omnipresence of all
Yeah.
this, and yes, allow for things to go back to scale back to where they
Yeah.
were,
Yeah.
hopefully years back.
Yeah. No, 100%. I do agree. And especially like, AI is definitely going to bring tons of changes, hopefully to the positive, as you
Mm,
said. But then definitely, of course, because we know social media, people will, definitely abuse AI with like, like already there are like, profiles on Instagram again, with AI avatars, like AI
mhm,
people,
mhm.
and they have like content, and it's like, man, it's crazy. Like, what's gonna happen? Like, definitely there will be a negative aspect with AI, but definitely, hopefully AI is gonna bring positive changes as well.
So
But
if
then
now
also,
AI also makes us feel bad about ourselves, now this is just
oh yeah,
unacceptable.
yeah, I know.
If now
But
the
then,
the
yeah,
computers are doing the same thing of making us feel negative, well,
I
what's the
know.
point of that? Yeah,
I know. But yeah, no, like definitely we have been accelerating, as you said, like quite a lot
yeah,
in the last 10 years. And I think, yeah, hitting the brakes a little bit and like decelerating and kind of taking a step back and kind of bring more awareness,
yeah,
to
yeah.
what we have been doing.
Mm.
Hopefully, yeah, I you know, I share the same kind of like hope, as you
And
on that.
I mean, I hope this happens, and we've seen now in societies that things can move forward,
Yeah.
and but they can also move backwards. And so often nowadays lots of things have been moving backwards that have been detrimental to societies, like
Yeah.
moving backwards in terms of personal freedoms and everything. But why not move backwards in terms of how we deal with social media,
100%.
which would be a positive in my
Yeah.
view. I think there is a case for just deceleration of everything.
Yeah.
because I think we are starting to see already that too much of this is not a good thing.
Yeah.
Uh, the data is clear. The data
Yeah.
is very clear on this, and this is why policymakers are starting to advance policies, because young people as well, many young people are very vocal about
Yeah.
the negative experiences that they've had on social media. It's very difficult. This is one of those things that needs to happen on a massive scale as well.
Mm.
It's difficult for an individual to fight this battle alone. Individuals, when they grow in numbers, they reach a critical point
Yep.
at one stage, and then the change becomes bigger and
Yeah.
more massive.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that the individual cannot do anything, or that the individual has no responsibility in this. They totally do. Individual users, families, but we should also try to make this stick and be influencers amongst our friends as well, so that this kind of takes root and starts, why not a social movement,
Yeah.
of just taking back control of some of this. S-
Yeah.
and then helped by policymakers, because it has to be both ways. It has to be from the bottom up, each
Yeah.
of us as consumers of all this information, but also w- we would need help from the top down, through
Yeah.
regulation, through
Yeah.
policies.
No, I like that. I do agree with you. And I think like in 2025 we are seeing a change, or at least I see with the content I kind of consume, is like, communities are coming back. And I think like communities, more people want that social, in person social interaction. And hopefully that will move, and that will be kind of the movement of like, you don't like socialize online, but you form a community based on what your hobbies are, and you just meet people in real life, like in
Yeah.
person, and you have
And
that.
that's perfectly fine. I mean, this is
Yeah.
this is the good side of social media, allowing you to
Correct.
find friends
Yeah.
in an online setting who you wouldn't necessarily find offline first. You
Yeah.
wouldn't bump into the street into
Yeah.
someone who has the same hobby as you, because you wouldn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but so yes, that's a beautiful example, because it shows the potential for social media to start something online. But then I would urge that relationship and these communities and these groups should also diversify and not just stick online, but develop in offline situations.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Petya, where can people follow and find you and follow your research?
Uh, so yes, I'm in a bit of a flux right now, because I'm moving away from Twitter, as many academics are, uh,
Yes.
for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So probably the University of Strathclyde webpage is the most all-encompassing uh, place where all of my past work, my future work will be housed there. It has
Yeah.
links to all my work with, to my publications, but also I work a lot with organizations,
Hmm.
with nonprofits and charities in mental health, with young people. And so yes, this is very much a topic that uh, in everyone's in everyone's life, and people are very much interested in it. So I enjoy taking that to, yes, to young people, and to parents, to teachers, and discussing that. So some of
Yeah.
that you will find there, all of those initiatives. Yeah.
No, perfect. Sounds good. And I will have the link down below in the description as well. No, it is, as you said, like it is a very interesting topic, and it affects every one of us. So it is worthwhile researching and, spreading the word of like, you know, the impacts of social media. So for me, that like, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a very interesting space. I'm not. We did talk mostly about negatives,
It's okay.
uh,
Yeah.
but I'm not of the opinion. I think if tomorrow all social media platforms closed, it
Yeah.
would be a loss in a big way, because there's lots of benefits, and we've made these connections with people that never would have existed before
Yeah.
social media, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
The challenge now is how do we make sure that we keep and we reap more of the benefits and less of the
Mm.
drawbacks. uh,
Yeah.
as with anything in life, there's pros and there's cons, but we always want to maximize the
Yeah.
benefits, and control the negatives. So that's what this conversation was about. I think is just how
Yeah.
do we address the negatives but keep as much of the positives of social media, of which there are many,
Yeah.
uh as possible.
Yeah. No, I definitely I do agree with you. And I think a lot of people are. I really want to hope that a lot of people are moving towards the positive aspects of social media. I do hope in the next 7 years, like and beyond, that that will be the case, and people harness the positive side of social media and not, have issues with their body image and like, yeah, that probably that will exist, but hopefully it will just decrease. Yeah, and it will become less and less relevant, and people will focus on the positive side.
Hmm. Yes,
Perfect.
let's hope
Yeah.
so. Yes.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you so much for your time as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me.